Ollie, pleasure to meet you, and thanks for bringing the car in.
Yeah, pleasure.
You don't just pop up as a racing driver. There's stuff that happens before that happens. So I think what I'm getting at is, where did you start? How are we at this point where we've got a 2 litre cup here?
Well, I started racing when I was 16 in historics, in an MGB actually. My father had raced a lot and had a connection with Porsche racing through the 70s and 80s. And I obviously grew up around the cars, going to events, seeing it all happen. And then when I was 16, we got a FIA MGB Roadster, which I started racing. And I raced on my own and also sharing with my dad in some historic endurance events. And that led to, you know, obviously the passion and the skills of how to do it being developed. And then I've raced sort of consistently since then in modern GT racing and predominantly historics throughout that whole period up to now.
Nice. So how many years have you been racing?
Well, since 2002.
Since
so,
2002.
Yeah,
quite a while.
Quite a while now, 23.
Yeah, 23 years.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's quite a journey. And of the cars that you've raced, is there a particular type of car that really fits the bill?
I've been lucky enough to race all sorts of cars, from modern GT cars, something as quirky as the Aero 8 Morgan, which was the first GT3 car I raced back in 2005. Yeah. Through Lotus 15s, AC Cobras, Lotus T70s. Yeah. Modern GT cars of all different makes. A particular affinity with Porsche. I raced in British GT back in 2007 in a 997 Cup car. Nice. And have raced different iterations of that Porsche over the years. And in more recent times, sort of 2015 onwards, so for the last 10 years now, I've raced a lot of these short wheelbase early 911s, which is why we're here with this one today. Yeah, nice. Awesome. So what is it specifically about Porsche that keeps you coming back then? They're just such fantastic cars. I mean, the layout of them, is a bit unorthodox, but has been proven to work time and time again from when they were first conceived. The historical built car that I raced for a number of years was a 901, so a very early car. Oh, right, wow. A 1964 car, and I raced that with Historica alongside Andrew Smith in the 2 litre Cup series, which started in 2018, and we had a lot of success with it. And off the back of that, I ended up driving this particular car, which is a 65 911, which Historica built and is owned by Carl Tilley of Era Motorsport, and we raced that together last year in the 2 litre Cup Championship, and I'm doing so again this year with him as well. Nice. And from what I can see, it went rather well. Yeah, last year we had a lot of success. Yeah, we were lucky in that we had 2 wins and 3 other podiums, so we scored good points in every round and came away with the championship. Congratulations. Which was great. Yeah, that's mega. So tell me more about the 2 litre Cup. So it's existed since 2018. How many rounds are there? What circuits are the highlights? So it was founded in 2018. That was the inaugural year for the series. The Peter Auto events, which are the top premier historic events in Europe, they run at 5 different rounds in Europe. This year, in fact, there's 6 plus Le Mans Classic, so there's actually 7 rounds of the series, although only 6 of them are for 2 litre Cup. Okay. It's all 911s, so all pre-65 short wheelbase cars, 901s and 911s. And there's normally between 25 and 35 cars on the grid, which is fantastic. I mean, it's very, very competitive, and it's basically like historic Carrera Cup, if you can imagine such a thing. There's a great number of preparers, a lot of good UK preparers, but also it brings out the top preparers in Europe as well. Does it? Okay. And 90-minute races, 2-driver crews normally. Yeah. I mean, I did the first round this year on my own because Kyle had commitments in Creventic with the Ferrari that they run. And I'm doing Spa in a couple of weeks on my own. Okay. And then Kyle joins me for the remaining 4 rounds of the year. So he'll be back with me to try and hopefully defend the title from last year. Awesome. The circuits we visit this year, we started in Barcelona. Yeah. We go to Spa in Belgium, which is probably my favourite circuit. It's my favourite circuit as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that as a track enthusiast or an ex-track enthusiast, because it's been a while since I've been on circuit, versus being someone who's ever done any racing. But from my, amateur experience, it's certainly the best circuit I've ever driven. Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear that someone who's a veteran like you, who's been around for 20 plus years doing this, the Spa is one of your favourite ones.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, it's iconic, and the layout's fantastic. I mean, it's obviously shorter than it used to be. I think it changed in the early 70s, but it's still one of the best tracks. Whenever you go there, the atmosphere's amazing, and then obviously you've got Eau Rouge, which is a serious corner that needs some big commitment, and is quite good fun in the old 911s with the weight out the back. But you know, that's one of the all-time great circuits, and been lucky enough to race there over the years in the historic cars. I've done the Spa 24 Hours and the modern GT cars.
Have you?
3 times there. So yeah, it's a real highlight for me, and
fantastic. We
normally get interesting weather.
That's it. I think that it's an interesting circuit because you've got the weather element of it, because it's big enough to have that. But you've also got, there's so much to it. There's elevation changes, off cambers, all sorts of different things going on. Yeah,
it's great. And you know, last year we had some pretty biblical weather over the weekend, with a number of races being red flagged. Unfortunately, the 2 litre race was okay, and it was mixed conditions. I mean, these cars are actually great in the wet. You know, they've got skinny tyres, which helps cut through the standing water. And great traction with the rear weight balance. So I really enjoy driving these cars in the wet, and that's normally where we as drivers get an advantage over the other crews in the championship, because you know, the cars are all very similar, so the wet weather allows you to kind of extract extra performance.
Interesting. Very good. So does that mean, before races anyway, you're looking at the weather forecast, but when you see rain on the horizon, that's a big smile on your face, is it?
Yeah, it certainly doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't.
Good man.
Doesn't concern us really. I mean, you know, Spa's typically quite wet. After Spa in June, we go to Dijon, and that's normally roasting hot that time of year. And then this year, for the first time, the series goes to Imola, which will be fantastic around there. It's a great circuit. So the first time that the championships visited that track, that'll be really good. And then in early September, we go to Paul Ricard, which again is normally roasting hot. And then we finish the year in Estoril in October, and that's always good. We did actually have rain last year, but hopefully some sunshine in October is always nice.
Nice, awesome. So my understanding is that Paul Ricard is quite a long circuit, quite a fast circuit. So how does a car like this fare on a circuit of that kind?
Yeah, it's not the best circuit for it. I mean, normally in terms of the closeness of the racing, Dijon's probably a better layout for the cars, but Paul Ricard's always a favourite. I think the series being European based, it's quite convenient for a lot of the French, and the time of year that it is suits them. But it's still a great challenge. There's some sectors which the 911s are great in. Obviously, the long back straight, the Mistral straight, is, you know, you're flat out down there. We do have the chicane in the layout that we use, so that's, you know, a bit of a challenge to get your braking right and get a good exit out of there. But all the races are good really. I mean, the circuits, the top tracks throughout Europe, so you know, and it's a well-run event, so the driving standards are normally very good as well, so it makes for a good challenge. Super cool.
So let's talk about the car itself. So what year is this particular car? What gear is this particular car?
65.
So it's a 65 car. And in terms of its prep, what needed to be done to the car to bring it to qualify for the 2 Ds Cup?
Well, so Historica built the car in 2022, 2023,
and how far do they go? They strip everything down to the bare metal?
They take the shell back and start from there. Obviously, fit a roll cage to the correct FIA standards. Replace any panels that have corroded through. So you know, if it needs floors, it'll have floors. If it needs wings, it'll have wings. I mean, being Porsches and predominantly haven't changed for many years, all the parts you need are pretty much available, which is good. The historical built cars are great because of the attention to detail in the inside as well. So you've got all the you know, the correct dash, the salt and pepper sort of carpets, you know, the correct window straps.
Let's have a look inside while we're talking about it.
Yeah. So you can see they're beautifully prepared, and they look, you know, with the exception of the roll cage and the race seat, they look predominantly like the road car would have done. So they're, you know, really nicely done. Engine and gearbox, you know, original to the car. They have to be completely gone through and prepped for racing.
Sure.
The gearbox is standard in terms of you know, the gear type and the gear sets that go in it. The engines have obviously had development over the years to get more power out of them, but they're correct in terms of the piston, valve size, etc. The exhaust manifolds are to a standard spec, and the regulations are very specific on all of that to make sure it's fair across competitors, to stop development in one area that could mean it just becomes an arms race, and which often happens in one-make racing. You know, if you're not in the best car, then you don't stand a chance. But the organisers made sure they keep
very
on top of
strict
that.
on it. Yeah.
So
displacement has to stay the same. Cams have to stay the same as well, I'm guessing.
No, I think cams are free. You can do what
cams you can do what you want.
Yeah, I'm sure with cams you can do what you want in terms of if you want a torquey engine, you could do that. Or if you want a peaky engine, you could do that.
But for a car like this, which weighs what, a Rizzler paper probably.
Yeah, I mean they're on the minimum weight. I think they have to be ballasted up to the minimum weight. So,
oh really? Okay.
So,
so what is the minimum weight?
I'm pretty sure it's either late 900s or early thousands, something like that.
That's what I anticipated. Because what I was getting at there is that what's called when speccing a cam for the engine, presumably for a car that's this light, actually you don't need that much torque and you might as well just go for horsepower.
Yeah, I think generally the push has been towards top end power.
Yeah.
Obviously with that comes reliability and maintenance issues on the valve train side of things. So I think there's been more of a focus in recent times of trying to get a bit of that torque back because actually on a race car, torque is what gives you the lap time. Having peak power, a power band between 7 and 8 is great, but you've got to come out of a slow corner and you can't always be at that rev range.
Sure.
You obviously are limited. You've got a standard spec gearbox, original gearbox. Yeah. So you've got quite big rev drops between gears. So you've got to have a drivable engine, which is what they focus on.
So the ratios are the standard ratios.
Yeah, I think there's two sets you can have from memory. There's the airfield ratios, which I think have got like an A designation after them, and then there's a longer top gear you can have, which we'd use in somewhere like Monza. Because that was going
to be my next question. Do you change gearbox and engine, or cam, depending on which circuit you're racing?
Gearbox.
Can you do that?
Gearbox, you can switch between gearboxes, or have your gearbox rebuilt and change the ratios between rounds. That's fine. The engines are sealed to stop people just throwing engines at the car to keep the budget under control. Okay. So the engine's sealed, and you can break the seal only once in a year. So if you've got an issue with your engine, you can fix it and/or fit a second engine, but you're only allowed 2 in the entire season.
Right. Interesting.
Which is something they've done to obviously stop people pushing the envelope and with the costs getting away from them. Yeah,
because I would have wondered whether you'd go for a very torquey cam for certain circuits and for other that you'd swap engines. What I'm getting at.
They've obviously made sure that doesn't happen, because then it would just become a bit of an arms race. But,
really interesting.
Generally speaking, the engines are pretty strong nowadays. The British preparers especially have sort of moved to the front really in terms of getting the engines to be powerful and reliable.
Speaking of, we'll just pop the hood because we're talking about something, we're not seeing it, and I'm sure it's a little jewel to look at.
Yeah, no, that is lovely.
Which it is, stunning.
Yeah, I mean they obviously have to run on the Solex carbs still, which are quite a pain to tune. You don't have the ability to do what you'd like to do with a Weber, for example. Because
my understanding with the Solexes is they're all independent, so they all need to be tuned up independently. Is that right?
Exactly. And they're all they're all meant to be the same, but in reality they're probably slightly different tolerances that are out on every carb. So you need to fine tune everything.
So I'm guessing there's a handful of guys in the UK, which are the people you go to tune these Solexes up.
Yeah, I mean this engine, as I say, this car was done by Historica, and they did the engine prep at their side, and they do the tuning as well. They've got an in-house.
Do they?
They've got an in-house rolling road. So
I didn't know that.
They do everything there. And then the car is based with Era Motorsport, who are down in Wiltshire, and they do the prep between events and the servicing and the race support for the car.
Well, I've got to say, credit where it's due. The car is stunningly prepared. I mean, the level of detail and how clean and tidy it is, it really is. And I've seen Historica's cars before. We run a big annual event called Megaphonics, and Nick and his customers have been kind enough to send us some cars, some 74 RSRs and bits and pieces, and they are all just as beautifully prepared as the next one. So yeah, credit to him. And in terms of the engine, what kind of horsepower is it putting out? Can I make a guess, actually?
Yeah.
Okay, so are you allowed to put titanium? Are you allowed to put forged rods in it, or do they have to be the standard rods?
I'm not sure. I would say it has to be fairly standard.
Okay, so on that basis, and I would guess that the RPM then, because with forged rods you could go up to like 8,000 RPM, although on a 2 litre that'd be pretty interesting. So I'm guessing if it hasn't got forged rods, you're probably at around 7,000 RPM.
I mean, it can rev to 8.
Really?
So we don't often rev it to 8.
Yeah.
But you can do. There's no rev limit in the series at the moment. That's probably something they're going to look at some point.
So if it does 8, I want to say 200 horsepower.
I think 200, depending on which rolling road you're on, would be a good number. I think in reality, it varies. I think a good engine is anywhere between 180, probably 190, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think the carbs are probably what hold you back there. I think if it was on Webers, you'd be over 200 horsepower easily. And it's quite restricted on the exhaust manifold. It's basically a standard Porsche sort of Dansk part, and the scrutineers have got a fiberglass moulding that fits exactly around the exhaust, so they can offer it up to your car after the session and check that you're running the correct manifolds. The back box, so everything from the manifolds back, is free, so that's where you can tune your lengths and try and develop some power that way. But the series is silenced as well, so the cars have to run silencers. So
are the engines very stressed? Do they need stripped down and be stripped down after every session?
I think
after every season.
With the sort of power they're developing now, you could do a season, which there's 90-minute races. There's 5 of them, plus half-hour quali, half-hour practice. So you're doing probably 15, 16, maybe even 20 hours in a season anyway. If you're doing it seriously and you're planning to get good results and run at the front, you would send the engine back for a check every year. I mean, this went back just for a sort of top and tail, and there was no issues, and it's gone back together. And it's actually going up to Historica this afternoon to go on the rolling road before the next round. So,
nice. Awesome.
I think at the end of the day, if they're being thrashed, which is basically what we do to them every weekend, then they're at that level faster. you've got to check things out. But they're generally speaking, fairly tough. The main issues people have is because the gearbox is, quite vague, shall we say. You can try and improve the linkage as best you can, but it's the early type gear tower. You're not allowed to fit one of the later ones that makes the gear shifting more accurate.
Interesting.
So the gears are a bit vague, and people that aren't used to them can occasionally put it in the wrong gear, and of course, then you over rev it and break a rocker if you're lucky, or you get something more serious happening. So that's the main issue people have when they jump in them, having not
Do you know, it's interesting. I was having a conversation a few years ago, and someone was building a high power horsepower engine. They were going for over 100 horsepower per litre, and they were advised to go with billet rockers.
Okay.
And I said to my friend, don't go with billet rockers, because actually you want them to break. They are kind of your barometer on you've gone too far. If they don't break, then you're going to end up with some serious damage. And actually, it's a weak point you kind of want to keep. So people tend to the thing to do is to shot peen them, so they are stronger than standard. But to go for titanium rockers or these billet rockers, I think it was billet, I forget. But these really, really, really strong rockers, I thought personally, I thought that's the bit you kind of want to break. You don't want valves to be, knocking into pistons and all the rest of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've had that. We've had it in the past where we've had a rocker go and it has just been the rocker. There's been no other damage. We do a leak down, fit a new rocker, and put the cam cover back on, and away we go. So we're fortunate that is the weak point. That if it does get a buzz, then hopefully that's what goes, and everything else is okay.
I've always understood that 100 horsepower per litre was kind of the benchmark for a road-going engine, and anything above that was kind of race engine territory. The engine, for example, in that is a 3-litre HDP engine, and it's pushing over 300 horsepower, so that is definitely a race engine. But it's just interesting to hear that this is a race engine, and it's at that 100 horsepower per litre kind of figure, which in my mind means it's probably not as stressed as it could be.
Yeah, I think, as I say, I think the limitation probably is the carbs and the exhaust manifold. I think if you weren't staying true to the period spec and you changed the carbs and put a trick exhaust on, I think you could easily develop more than that. I mean, the 911 ST that I race with Historica, that's got the benefit of being on better carburetors, and that obviously makes a big difference. Also, you can run electronic ignition on some of the later cars, which I think gives a stronger spark, whereas these have got to stay on the period distributor, etc. So you're probably limited there as well. Yeah,
nice. And I don't know if you can capture this, Tom, but we've got to look at the exhaust system on this car, because it is a work of art, and it's showing it all off. It's not hiding anything, is it? It's really got its skirt up there.
Yeah, no, I think, as I said, that anything manifolds back is where you're free to sort of tune the lengths and come up with your own idea. I think a few of the preparers in the UK had similar ideas of bringing the system out to increase that length, which is why they've had to run it low behind the bodywork there. It then does join behind that bumper panel and does go through silencers before it exits in the twin exit there.
So it must be really interesting. Sorry, swallowing my words there. It must be really interesting, is what I was trying to say, to see how people are experimenting with exhaust systems and and competing on that side of things.
Yeah, that's what ended up happening. I think with hindsight, looking back on it, if the idea was to make it a level playing field for everybody and try and keep costs down, they should have specified the manifold and the back box system just as a standard part. From Design 911 or something like that. Just choose a dance system complete. That's the part that's specified, and then everybody was working with the same thing. But at the end of the day, it's motorsport, and if you give people the opportunity to try and develop something to get some gains, and that's what's going to happen.
But that's part of the fun. There's competition on the racetrack, but also within parameters, having competition in terms of engineering is interesting as well.
For sure.
Yeah. No, it's beautifully prepared. The interior is absolutely lovely as well. No, it's really nice. And I see you've got your helmet there. That's a really nice design. You've got a tartan. Can we get that out?
Yeah.
Actually, have a closer look while we're at it.
Yeah. So this is. On my father's side of the family, we're related to the Campbells. So,
okay.
From the speed record, the Bluebird, etc. So that's Campbell tartan.
Yeah.
And then the Union Jack livery is something I've had since I sort of first had a painted helmet, probably back in 2003, 2004, something like that.
Yeah, awesome. And what's the paw prints on the back?
Oh, handprints. Those are my boys actually.
I'm teasing. No, that's sweet. That's very sweet.
Yeah, I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, so that's the larger hands, and the smaller hands of those boys.
That is very cute.
So,
and I can't help but see you've got a Charles and Dean logo there, which is perfectly timely and not coincidental, considering they're a sponsor of Megaphonics for our event this year.
Yeah, well, I know Simon and Tom from Charles and Dean. They approached me a few years ago at Goodwood actually, and we've had a partnership since then, and they've stayed on board for a number of years, and in the circles we're in the historic world, there's a lot of potential customers for them that we try and introduce to them as and when, and a number of cars that I've raced and cars that I've been involved in have been funded through those guys. So
nice.
Yeah, they're a good bunch of guys, and they're passionate about cars and they love being involved. So it's great to continue that. That's
awesome. That's really cool. So from the racing side of things, they're a sponsor of you and your racing.
Yeah. So I'm effectively a brand ambassador for them, and we have a tie-up from that side, and they come along to events and bring guests and clients along, and at places like Goodwood, it's great for them to get some sort of behind-the-scenes access and have a look around the cars that I'm involved with, and it makes for an interesting angle for them, which gives them access to sort of a side of it that on the outside they wouldn't necessarily be linked to. Yeah,
for sure. It's great to see It's great to see companies investing in historic racing and that side of things, and that's really, really cool. And tell me, you said that they financed some of your cars, so tell me a little bit about that, if that's all right.
Well, we've also got a 2 litre 911 a 65 car, an early 65 car in barley blue.
Oh, nice.
It's got a houndstooth interior. And
that's a great colour. And that's a road car?
It is a road car, but it is actually prepped to a very similar spec to this.
Interesting.
Historica did the cage and the seats and
okay.
The engine and the box, actually. So it would present very similar to this car.
Yeah.
It's got softer cams because we've done the Tour Auto rally event in it through France, which I did with my dad a few years ago. And it also ran in the All 911 race at Revival a couple of years ago. So that's a great car, and that's something that Charles and Dean helped with the funding of that once we'd had the works done. So they're involved on that side for a number of cars, and also I've introduced them to a few of the customers that I've worked with and raced with, and they help them out as well. So that's good.
Okay, awesome. And in terms of financing, what are the kind of things that you were looking for from a finance company that they were able to deliver?
I think really it's an ability to, they're a broker obviously, so they can speak to different lenders out there in the market and work out who's got the appetite for that particular deal, and they can choose something that suits. I think that's probably key really, and they make it very seamless, very easy to do. I mean, a number of my personal cars have been financed with them as well, and you reach out to somebody in the team and you get an answer in a few hours, and it's it can be done that week. So I think that's fantastic. Probably what makes it easy. If you work with a well-respected broker, it just makes everything seamless. Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of people have fear of finance on the basis of the clarity that's there, feeling that they might not understand the ins and outs of it. So what's your experience been in terms of understanding exactly what the products are?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, we've been involved with cars and motorsport and racing for a number of years, so we've been around the sort of finance industry when it comes to all sorts of levels of funding, and I think with Charles and Dean, you just give them what you need, and they go and find a solution that works. You know, it's very straightforward, very transparent, and I think quick delivery is key. You know, if you're looking to buy a car, you know, whether it's a car you're buying as a project, or you know, an existing race car, or just a road car, the ability to know that you can get it done in the time frame, especially if you're putting your hand up at an auction.
True.
The ability to know that you can follow through with it is key, and they can obviously deliver that, which is very handy.
Nice, awesome. I think from our standpoint, you know, we're always looking for long-term relationships. We want to grow with the brands that we work with. Short-term relationships are short-lived, and it's just not really what we're about. And I think for us, the standout thing was their level of involvement inside automotive communities was extremely high, and you could see that there was a lot of passion there. They were real car people, and you know, since working together, we've discovered that, you know, Porsche is one of their best brands in terms of what they deal with there.
It's good. Yeah, as I say, Simon and Tom, you know, they approached me, and they've come along to a number of the events with me, and they bring guests along, and you know, they're definitely car people, which I think helps, because you know, they are brokers, so they can fund anything, you know, from a coffee machine through to, you know, new commercial vans, etc. But at the end of the day, I think the things they like funding are the cars that they like. Yeah, sure.
But it can be a little bit of a challenge. I mean, like some cars, for example, like with all due respect to a Vauxhall Corsa, which is a great car, is a relatively easy car to finance. Whereas something like a performance car or a race car or like more specialized cars is what I'm getting at, can be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
So I think having a company that really understands the product that they're actually financing against, the car that they're financing against, I think makes a big difference in being able to find good packages to underwrite those cars.
Yeah, and I think they obviously got, you know, especially when it comes to historic cars and, you know, some of the supercars nowadays where they hopefully tend to appreciate rather than depreciate. That makes a big difference when you're putting the package together to understand what the value is going to be in 3 or 4 years time. So an understanding of that makes it better, and obviously better value for the customers.
For sure. Nice. Awesome. Very cool. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to ask you about the car. I think we pretty much covered everything. Overall, what an awesome machine. And thank you for sharing, you know, what's called your journey with it. I look forward to seeing it out on track doing its thing.
Yeah, well, this year actually, Peter Auto, who are the French-based organisers of the series, they live stream every event on YouTube. So Barcelona was streamed for the whole event, and we were fortunate enough to win that first round after a really good battle with a couple of other very quick 911s. The rest of the rounds will also be live streamed. So if you want to follow it, you can tune in there.
I'll definitely have to tune in. I mean, it's fantastic that you can watch it over YouTube for these things, for sure. And just going back on something you said earlier, you know, what's called Tour Auto. That must be it looks like a hell of an event, and that's something I personally would love to do in a few years' time. I think one of the questions I wanted to ask you is from the perspective, because I'm someone that's never raced before, and it's something I would love to do. And I think a lot of people find it daunting figuring out or navigating where to go to get started.
Yeah.
So are there any pearls of wisdom that you've accumulated over the years in terms of someone who wants to try and get into historic racing?
Yeah, I think there's, as you say, it can be daunting from the outside. You know, where do you start? What do you do? You know, the entry point in terms of cost can be, you know, a deterrent depending on what people's positions are. There's so many different ways in, and it really depends on the types of events you want to go to and what you want to end up achieving from it. You know, if you're looking for a great way of starting at fairly sensible cost, something like the Caterham Academy is fantastic as someone who's never raced before. You know, you're not allowed to do it if you've ever had a race license or ever raced at all. So everybody's in the same boat. So you meet people from all walks of life, and they go along, buy the Academy car, you do all your racing, and you get your license and do all your racing over that initial year. And then at the end of that year, you can no longer do the Academy because you've now got a year's racing under your belt. So you can then upgrade your car, and you can do that 2 or 3 times. You can stay with that same family for a 3 or 4 year period. A few friends of mine have done that. And you've also got Fun Cup, which is another great series. In the sort of silhouette Beetles is what they look like. They're actually more advanced than they look. They've got sort of tube frame chassis, and the bodywork is really just clipped on, really. That's a very, very good series and very sensible from a cost point of view. They're long races as well, so you can share it with 3 or 4 other drivers to share the cost of that. And then if you want to go down the historic route, there's many, many ways into it. UK-based series that are fairly sensible from an entry cost point of view, and you can race anything from, an MGB, which is how I started, right the way through to 2 litre 911s, Porsches, other Porsches, Cobras, E-types. The list is endless, really. So, the best thing really is to work out what sort of events you want to do. If you want to do it sort of to a semi-professional level, and you want to be at the most competitive level, you want to end up doing touring cars or something like that, that's a very different approach to, well, I want to do the Tour Auto and I'd love to do Le Mans Classic. Well, you could have a plan to do that, and it would take you 3 or 4 years probably to get the right qualifications and get a car that could get you there. And that's a different approach to I want to go tin-top racing. So there's definitely various different ways of doing it. And,
Interesting.
And I do quite a bit of driver coaching with people I work with, and we choose which route they want to go and sort of work to achieve that. And
so here's a question for you, because you've done professional racing as well as gentleman driving, right? Gentleman racing.
Yeah, I mean, I've raced, in my modern GT career, that was sort of to a semi-professional level. Depending on who I was driving with or how the team worked that year. In some circumstances, sponsorship would be found, and I'd bring sponsorship to the team, and so would everybody else, and that would make the whole thing happen. And then in the sort of pro-am world, where I would be the pro and the am would fund everything, then in those situations there wouldn't need to be any budget, and I'd be able to receive an income from doing it. So there's that side of it, and then of course you've got the historic racing, where it's a bit more gentleman based, and the idea is you go along and have a great weekend away doing what you're doing. I've been lucky enough to be able to drive a lot of people's cars on that basis.
Nice.
In the 2 litre Cup Series, obviously we won the championship last year with Kyle in this particular car, and with Historica won the series in 2018 in the inaugural year, and in 2022 as well. So managed to win the 2 litre Cup Series 3 times, but I'm by no means just a 2 litre Cup expert, I suppose. I race lots of other cars which are completely different to this. And there's quite a unique driving style in the 2 litre cars, which doesn't really apply to a lot of other cars. They're a bit like a front-wheel drive in certain ways, in that when you're getting sort of quite out of shape, adding full power actually solves the problem, which doesn't work in a lot of other cars.
Yeah. That I remember years ago. That getting that advice that with Porsches, like the last thing you want to do is let off the power, because because you're going to end up with that pendulum behind you. So it's always about keeping your foot planted.
That's the daunting thing for somebody beginning, is that,
of course,
when you turn into a corner, and generally cars are predominantly quite stable if you're on the brakes or on full power. It's in that interim phase when you're turning in and you're off power, that's when the car will move, and having the confidence to go, I'm facing where I want to go now let's go back to full power. It's that transition. And of course when you do go full power, the weight goes back over the rear wheels, and the car drives out the corner comfortably. So it's just getting the feel and the finesse for that, which takes a lot of getting used to, and that's where all the lap time is in these cars, is that transition stage. At the end of the day, they all do the same speed down the straight. It's about making sure you're on the throttle as much of the lap as you can be.
Interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, from my understanding of performance driving that I've done, it's always been about getting the car nicely set up, being very smooth with your transitions. But I think a Porsche isn't forgiving if you don't do that. In some ways, I would almost say that a 911 is very good at teaching you how to drive very well, regardless of what the car is later down the line. Because it's less forgiving. But with these cars, it's so important to get everything done before your apex, what's called, and then powering out of it. Whereas in other cars, they're a lot more forgiving for transition changes mid-corner.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think if you can drive one of these 2 litre 911s well, you can drive anything, because they are quite an art to get your head round. But once you've sort of sussed it, then the concept of how you drive it, you can actually apply to a number of other cars. At the end of the day, if you focus on your corner exit and getting on the throttle early and getting good traction, then you can apply that philosophy to any car you drive.
Yeah, and I think it's for all 911s. I mean, especially the old ones, because they don't have any drive arrays, and the short wheelbases with the wheels are really tucked in, what's called tucked into each other. But certainly, Yeah, if you can drive a 911, you can, on all 911, you can drive anything really.
Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. And one question I wanted to ask you as well was, so between the semi-professional racing and the more gentleman racing, if that's the right term, what do you prefer? Where is your heart?
I mean, because I started in historics, in old cars at a sort of more clubby level, and then I've done the modern racing to a high level through GT3, and then I raced in GTE at Le Mans in 2016 and 2017, and then predominantly for the last 8 years I've been back in historics again. So I've done a bit of both to a high level. At the end of the day, you're driving the car to the limit of what you've got. So if you're in a low-powered historic car on skinny tyres, or you're in a big GT car on huge slicks with loads of power, at the end of the day, the skill and the enjoyment is getting the car as close to its limit. So actually, I don't mind which one it is. Being at the front in either the historics or the modern racing, and being on the limit of what the car can do and getting a great result with you and your team and your teammates, I think I get just as much enjoyment out of both, really. I think it comes down to knowing that you're at the maximum of what you've got, be that the machinery, the team, or what have you.
Interesting. And the other side of it, here's a question as well, is that with professional racing, there's obviously a lot more bureaucracy than is involved with doing it for fun, I guess.
Yeah, I think in the modern racing, it's taken a lot more seriously. There's a lot more financial risk, I suppose, at stake. There's a lot more cost that's going into the modern racing. So, it's very professional in terms of your preparation for each event, track walks, your training, nutrition throughout the weekend, how you work as a team. Whereas in the historics, it is taken seriously. At the front end of any historic grid, there's a lot of money involved. Yeah. But yourself and your other competitors, will have a beer after the race, and over the weekend you'll maybe have dinner with some of your rivals on 2 or 3 evenings. Whereas in the modern racing, teams just stay together as soon as the session's done. It's early bed and get ready for the next day. So it's more sociable from a historic on the historic side, and there's some fantastic events now. Goodwood, members meeting, Revival, Silverstone Festival over in the UK, and then of course Le Mans Classic. It's an enormous event. If you go to that, it's it's almost on a par with the modern Le Mans in terms of the number of spectators and car clubs that go. So there's some really big standout events now, and it's taken seriously. But at the end of the day, the people that own those cars and enter the cars to go and race, they're doing it as a hobby. They're doing it to have fun. So at the end of the day, what you've got to, it's great people taking it seriously, but at the end of the day, they've got to try and make sure they're having a fun weekend. Otherwise, they'll go do something else. Yeah.
Interesting. No, I just wondered whether, what's called some of the enjoyment is lost when you start doing something too professionally.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, as a driver, you get great enjoyment out of the driving when you're in the car. Yes, there's more going on behind the scenes in the modern events, and especially in the GT racing, you've got balance of performance where they try and equalise all the cars, and that can cause a bit of grief behind the scenes to make sure you're all getting a good chance of doing well. Whereas in the old cars, generally the enjoyment is the whole event, and with the highlight being the on-track action.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for bringing the car in. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you about it. And as I said, I look forward to seeing you and the car out on track. So thank you very much for your time. And apologies for the sound. I make no excuses. This is a working workshop, so there's always stuff going on. So hopefully it's not been too detrimental to the video. But thank you very much, and see you soon.
Good to see you.